Thanks for joining us today. My name is Randy Sklar. I'm the president of Sklar Technology Partners. Today we're going to be learning about securing digital assets, your data that's on your servers and systems and wherever the information may be stored, and how the data is being compromised. You hear in the news about companies being compromised all the time. Prior to our session here, I went online and just kind of did a little research for the last 30 days or so of companies or corporations or organizations that have been compromised or breached as a result of mishandling of data or some sort of way for an intruder to get in. So I'm just going to read off a few. The Metro Community Provider Network, which is a small healthcare provider in Denver, had to notify over 2,000 patients or their members. They provide low-cost healthcare to low-income individuals. They had to notify over 2,000 people that their identities were exposed. This occurred because an employee responded to a phishing email. We'll get into what a phishing email is if you don't know exactly how it works, but they basically one of the employees that worked for the provider fell victim to a scam and clicked on a link or installed a program on the machine that allowed the intruder to access their system. The University of Miami had a breach recently. Over 1,200 identities were exposed. This one's a little different. Nobody broke in or got into the system. The identities were stolen off of a USB hard drive that was in somebody's car, and they broke into their car and stole the contents, which included the USB drive. Indiana University, over 1,200 identities exposed. They discovered it was done through malicious software installed on one of their servers. So the Times Dispatch had a report recently. You may have heard of this. The VTU was compromised, exposing over 176,000 identities. In fact, that number may have gone up over 200. But they also had malicious software installed on their servers, and that's how the intruders were able to get access to this information and steal it. And then the Wall Street Journal had reported that Nortel had not only been compromised, but had been compromised many times over the past 10 years. It had gone unreported, and they had done nothing really to stop it from happening. They didn't see that it was an important issue, so they just let it keep happening. There was the leadership. I think they were also in financial distress, so they were just dealing with it, the fact that it was happening, and did nothing about it. That's a little disconcerting, but that's what's happened here recently, and there's always some new company being breached. Most of them don't make the news. Some may never even know that it occurred. So let's just go ahead and dive in here to the presentation. Today we're going to learn about two major things, the hype versus reality, how these intruders are getting in, how they're stealing data. There's a lot of misconceptions about how that actually occurs. And so we'll go over how it really happens, and then how you can build an asset mindset into your organization to help mitigate the likelihood that it could happen in your company, and that there's some well thought out plans and just understanding how it happens and knowing what to do. So starting off with the hype versus reality, why your data is not safe. We look at trends, the threats, and the methods, how it's occurring. So starting off with the trends, it's kind of identity theft became prevalent about, I don't know, close to 10 years ago. You start seeing the guy on TV selling identity theft protection. I think it's LifeLock. He was interviewed several times, and you start hearing about data being exposed and people's identities being stolen and used in fraudulent ways. And then in 2004, you start hearing about companies being compromised, primarily targeting their credit card numbers. So in 2004, a gentleman named Brian Salcedo is just a novice hacker, developed a software program capable of just stealing the credit card numbers. He drove to a local Lowe's where he pulled up in the parking lot and gained access to their systems through the wireless network that was left unsecure. He installed his program that he developed, and as a result, it crashed the system. So the IT department discovered what had happened. They found this program installed on their server, and they alerted the authorities. So the authorities started to monitor the parking lot and just kind of see if they come back. And so Brian went home and redeveloped his application, and he came back and installed it through the wireless network, and this time it worked, and he started to download credit card numbers. Of course, the police were right there, rushed in and arrested Brian and his counterpart, and they served time, and they essentially didn't get to steal any of the data, although they were able to break in and download and get the program installed and working correctly. And Brian was just a novice. Then we move into 2005, a year later, and we got 57 million people now exposed, have their identities exposed. And this is a list of breaches that occurred over the course of that year, or at least the ones that were had reported and that were of big names. I've highlighted a few here. You've got the University of Virginia and George Mason. A lot of these groups are educational institutions that would have alumni and lots of identities. So identity theft is still the primary target back in 2005, and they're selling for probably somewhere between $5 and $20 each online. So you can do the math, 57 million, there's a lot of profit to be made there. There's not a lot of overhead either. It's not a lot of work to steal identities. I'll show you just how simple it is coming up. So the Air Force, the Bank of America, the Wachovias, lots of financial institutions in there too, Ameritrade. So then now looking forward today, we're up over actually 350 million identities have been compromised. So that's more than half of America. So the whole population is somewhere around 5 to 600 million, and so now we're over that. So it's definitely the case. I know myself I've received 2 letters in the mail over the course of the last 5 years or so, telling me that my identity was exposed as a result of a security breach. You may have received a similar letter as well. It's not uncommon if you have. Certainly most of us have seen some sort of credit card fraud. So now we're moving to 2009 and 10 and 11, and the Wall Street Journal had a report back in 2009 that stated that over $40 million had been stolen out of small business bank accounts. So those are companies like yours and mine in most cases. And then just recently in 2011, there was another Wall Street Journal report that reported over $1 billion. So you can see the trend. It's 40 million to $1 billion in just a couple of years. So the target now is directly accessing these bank accounts. These intruders have found ways to just get to the money the easy way, and now they don't have to sell identities and credit card numbers, which honestly has gotten commoditized and they're not worth very much. So they had to find a new target that they could generate more revenue from. And small businesses are the target typically because of the lack of security that's in place. The picture in this slide is a gentleman named Mr. Anglisteri. He's from Chicago. He owns a newsstand. In fact, he has 2 sites, and they sell newspapers and magazines and things like that. And he has revenues of about $1 million. So it's a very small company, very slim profit margin because it's a commodity. It's newspapers. It's more of a convenient sale. And so his profit margins are slim. And so what happened is his point of sale systems that he takes the credit cards on was compromised with some malicious software. And so somebody was sifting his credit card numbers as he was processing them. And so MasterCard gave him a call and said, your computers seem to be compromised. A lot of the people who come to your shop are now having credit card fraud issues. People are getting false purchases for TVs from Best Buy and other states and just numerous things like that. You may have encountered something like that yourself. And so he had his friend or his son-in-law or his service provider come in and clean up his machine, and everything was deemed to be okay. Well, a couple weeks later, he gets another call or email from them or letter stating that, again, his system seemed to be compromised. He's exposing information. He calls in the guy, and then after the 3rd time, they call and they say, okay, here's the deal. We're not giving you your payments that are due to you, and we're demanding that you do this investigation, and you need to use a legitimate security company here in town. It's going to cost you $22,000. So you can imagine that was probably at least a third or a half of his profitability for the year in his small newsstand company. This article was written in the Wall Street Journal. There were 2 other companies that were also included in the same article. One was a Ford dealership in Kansas called Green Ford. What happened in their case was some outsider got into their accounting system and created 9 fake payroll accounts. They then distributed cash into those accounts, and they were able to withdraw on 6 of the 9 accounts before the owner of the company came in the next morning and discovered what had happened. and then called the bank to stop it and kill those accounts. They made off with about $22,000 in that case, a little over that, and they actually deposited over 60, but they were only able to withdraw about 20-something thousand. And the bank was not at fault. They did not get that money back. They just lost that cash. The bank was not at fault because their system wasn't compromised. It was the customer system that was their database was compromised. So there's nothing the bank could have done about it. And then the third story in that article was about a burger company in Washington State. They have, very similar to Mr. Anglisteri, had point of sale systems they were selling, their product with, and the same thing happened. MasterCard or Visa, I forget, held back payments until he cleaned up his system with a professional organization. He essentially ran out of cash during that time and went bankrupt and had to fold and close his business, and killed his dream, as he said it in the as he quoted in the article. So the threat, who's behind these attacks? So there are new organizations popping up every day, new motives, new targets. Before it was identities, now it's cash. There was actually a recent story about an organization that was selling stolen MP3s. They were based in New Zealand. This guy had a giant mansion as a result, and he recently was caught. But he's in a different country, so you may have heard of Anonymous. That's another organization. They are basically deeming themselves as Robin Hoods of attackers. They're not doing it for money. They're doing it for notoriety, and they're doing to right the wrong. So Sony was one of their targets. And what happened is one of their members, his name is George Hotz, one of Anonymous's members, had changed or modified his PlayStation, his Sony PlayStation, and found a way to do something with it that it wasn't designed to do, and had posted it on YouTube, sort of a how-to-do-it-yourself method. And Sony found that and said that they were going to sue him. Well, he said, it's my product. I bought it. There's nothing you could do to stop me. It's not legally something that you can do. So they sued him, and he and some of his other members of Anonymous decided they would retaliate. And over the course of about 12 to 18 months, they hacked Sony 19 times. In fact, they would give them specific dates of things that would happen to them, and they would shut their network down. They would say on November 9th, we're going to hack into your credit card system, disrupt that, and then they would proceed to do so if you don't drop our court case. And the Sony executives basically said, we're helpless. There's nothing we can do to prevent these attacks. And it cost them millions and millions of dollars. The estimation was $300 and something per member, per person, and it was like 70 or 80 million. This was the cost. Notification, and obviously it's hard to measure what the long-term impact is. A lot of times it's not the attack that costs the company money, it's the image and the tarnishment of the trust in the system and the frustration. Their Sony PlayStation online service was down for over a month, and so their users were basically without service, and probably a lot of them abandoned it to go to other services like Xbox Live or something else. So these guys are living lavishly. Most of them originate their crime companies are in Russia or Southeast Asia. These guys are openly doing these attacks and not really worried about the repercussions, and a lot of times there is nothing that can be done about it. So today it's $1 trillion plus business, organized crime, cybercrime. It's exceeded the world drug trade industry. So the days of growing drugs in other countries and importing them in on these ships and storing them in warehouses and breaking it down and distributing it out on the streets, that's not worth the effort anymore. The money is easily made if you can set up a shop in a warehouse somewhere and just have some computers stealing data, sifting through it, finding what's worth it, and then selling it on these gray markets. You don't even have to lift a finger. A lot of this information is automated. It's all automated. The data is brought to them. I'll show you exactly how that works. So it's a growing issue. It's not going anywhere. Shadow Crew is another organized crime company. They were responsible for the 2 largest breaches that had ever occurred. One of their captains, Albert Gonzalez, he lived in Miami. If you go to shadowcrew.com today or org, I can't remember, it's down. It's been taken down. But this was their website, and they even have a slogan: "Stop talking and do business." So you could see that they were selling credit card numbers, bank accounts, all kinds of information right there on their website. So you can just go online and buy the stolen information from Shadow Crew. So it's pretty gutsy. And the captains, there was 5 major ones, and they were Canada and obviously the gentleman in Miami, U.S. And these are young guys in their 20s. So they're finding new ways to make money every day, stealing directly from bank accounts. They're always finding ways to turn information into a profit. So the method, how are they doing this? So it's quite simple, and this is where the myth and the hype comes in, and what's real and what isn't. So they're developing software programs that are designed for malicious intent. You can call it malicious software, malware, crimeware, any number of names, but in the end, it's software that's designed to get information or allow somebody access to your system against your will. An example would be a keystroke logging program called a keylogger. So if a keylogger was installed on your system and it was recording your keystrokes, which is what it does, it's surveillance software, and then these keystrokes are recorded and sent back to the host of this that designed the software, he would have all your keystrokes. So if you were, for instance, to log into your online bank account, you might type in www.wachovia.com, your name, Randy Sklar, and then your password, and that information is recorded. Doesn't matter how strong the password is, they get the keystrokes, and then they can now access your bank accounts and move money out of your bank account and put it into their own, or however they're going to steal your money. So these bots are distributed, and the way they get installed on your computer is, in most cases, you install them. You might accidentally fall victim to a scam, like a phishing scam. So if you get an email, and a recent one was the Better Business Bureau was used, and it would state that you had a complaint filed against your company. So anybody would want to know what was happening. So if you clicked on that link, you would install their bot. And so then that bot would be on your system, allowing this person or a group of people access to your data in your system. It's a very simple process. It could be another popular one. Popular phishing scam was a UPS parcel was trying to be mailed to you. It hadn't been. It's been sitting on their dock, and now there's a storage fee. So the attachment would be maybe a Word document or Excel document, would have an invoice attached. So you would be curious, and you open up this file, and you install this software that's embedded in that file, and you fell victim to their scam. I actually have seen this just recently with a hotel booking, that your hotel booking has been confirmed, and to see the confirmation, here's the attachment, here's your invoice. So it's very tricky. And it can also happen through social media. Somebody could, in maybe Facebook, they would send you a link to a quiz, or pass you a drink, or send you a gift, or invite you to a poker game or some other game. And it's a scam, and it's not really joining you into any game. You click on the link, you download this bot code onto your system, and now you're compromised. And the real impact is that nothing really seems to happen. It's like a virus would disrupt your machine and cause it to crash, and you would probably have performance issues. But when was the last time we heard of a virus outbreak? It's been probably 2 or 3 years that I can recall, or maybe even longer than that. And so you would think the security issues are gone, but they're replaced with you hearing these stories about companies having their data stolen. So these software programs are designed to be stealth and not disrupt your machine. Very advanced technology. These creators are very crafty and are very good at creating this code. Where should you be concerned? So uneducated people in your company clicking on links and misusing the internet, or accidentally falling victim to these scams. Intentional misuse, maybe sharpening information that's against corporate policies and things that you wouldn't want. The social engineering scams, that's where somebody tricks you into clicking on a link or clicking on some sort of something to get you an attachment in your email. There's certainly been advancements in this malicious software. There's polymorphing software now that changes form every 3 to 4 seconds. So it becomes a different tool or a technology every few seconds. So it's very hard to detect and clean the software off. A lot of times it'll actually sit dormant on the machine until the machine is idle for a certain amount of time, and then it'll go to work so that it knows that you're away from the system. And then that's a picture of Mr. Gonzalez, our captain of Shadow Crew, who was responsible for the nation's or the world's 2 largest security breaches ever, TJ Maxx and Heartland credit card processing. He claimed to be in both of those businesses for years, just stealing data. Heartland was actually considered PCI compliant, and he said that he was in there for over 3 years just stealing their data. Okay, the asset mindset. This is the call to action. This is what we do. We're going to go over how security works, where to look, and how to evaluate your risk and where to focus your efforts. So the keys to security is asking yourself these 3 questions. What am I trying to protect? What kind of data or digital assets do we have stored on our systems? Most people have important data. They have accounting data. Maybe they have emails. Maybe email data is considered very sensitive or important to your company. Office documents, Word, Excel type information, proprietary data, intellectual property, anything. Then the second question, what are the relevant threats? What are all the things that can cause this information to become compromised, to be lost, or to be just unavailable for an extended amount of time and some sort of outage that would impact our business? And how comfortable are you with your ability to detect and respond to any of those incidents? So if you don't have a plan to deal with those things, what happens if you're breached? What would you do to deal with that issue? Those are questions to ask. So let's talk about Security 101. And it doesn't matter if we're securing our home or our office or a bank vault or our cars or even our data. It's the same. It's the same methodology. So with your house, most people would have, in this example, locks on your doors, probably deadbolts, window locks. Those are kind of standards. Everybody has those things. And then maybe have a barking dog that alerts you that somebody's gotten near your house or in your house, or maybe even a man-eating dog, a dog that would attack and maybe hurt a perpetrator, a gun, a firearm of some sort, maybe have motion lights or an ADT or a detection system of an alarm, or a big fence maybe to keep people out. And these are things that almost everybody uses at some level or another. Maybe you have all of them or a portion of them, but everybody has them. So there's no mystery behind these measures of security. So what you end up with is a list of about 9 items here, and these things will not secure your home. The system that they work in will secure your home. So the system has to work or the security will fail. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So we've broken these out in 3 categories. A protection, which keeps them out, the locks, the deadbolts, the fences. Your detection, which hears them come in. And then your response is how you're going to deal with the issue. Maybe you're going to call 911 and hope the police get there in time, or maybe you're going to deal with it on your own. So these things have to work together in a system. If you can't keep them out, then you'll have to hear them come in. If you hear them come in but don't have a way of dealing with how to respond to them, then your family could be at risk, or your items of value could be stolen. So if you look at these 3 columns, most would tend to say the most important one is the protection, is keeping these perpetrators out, keeping the intruder out of the house. The reality is the most important aspect of security is the detection. The detection is not only the most important, but it's also the most difficult to do. You cannot keep anybody out of your home. They can break a window and get in. You can accidentally leave a door unlocked. I've done that before. In my garage, I was cutting the grass or something the day before and forgot to lock the door because the wind would blow it shut and it would lock the door, so I just left it unlocked and forgot to lock it. So at any rate, anybody can get into any system at any time. It's been proven time and time again, including your data systems. So you're completely reliant on your ability to detect and rapidly respond to an incident before the data or your people in your house are hurt or compromised. And detection is difficult if you think about like a car alarm. If a car alarm goes off in a parking lot, almost nobody will run out there and see if somebody's broken into the car. It just doesn't happen. Everybody's alarms are constantly going off, and you just cut it off from your office, or maybe the person would eventually get out there and deal with it. But nobody's going to go running out there. It's too sensitive. So if it's too sensitive, nobody will believe it. And then if it's not sensitive enough, somebody can break into that car and steal the contents, and the alarm would never go off. So it's a very difficult thing to accomplish. So let's talk about the botnet. So you remember me talking about the bot code and the software robots. A bot is a software robot. So it's something that would get attached to your computer and is automated. It's doing something automatically, whether it's collecting data and sending it back to the host, or it's automatically lending somebody access to your data. It's automated is the bottom line. And so it's a network of computers that are compromised with these bots with a command center. So somebody is behind it in the end. So let's give an example. So here's our internet cloud. The internet is boundless. It's a global system. There's no boundaries by state or counties or regions. There's no limits here. So your business, just think of it being attached. You've got information stored on computers on your business. You have a law firm. This is just an example. Healthcare. You have government agencies. You have people's personal computers. You have all kinds of organizations, manufacturing, big companies, small companies, all across the board. So they're all attached to the same internet network. So are the cyber criminals, the people that are located in China. Some are here in the United States. Some are they're all over the place. They're global. So they're attached to the same network. So they develop their bot code. They put it in the wild. They may send out some spam messages or some phishing emails to try to get people to click on their bots and get them to install them. Once the bots are installed, now they can automatically have the data coming back to them into their business or their organization, and now they can turn it into a profit. So the mindset is the old mindset is they broke into a firewall. And in most cases, almost all hacks are not targeted. They're just anonymous, except for situations with big companies like the Sonys of the world and maybe the government agencies. Those are targeted attacks. But even still, they're using this bot code with phishing scams and social engineering scams, tricking people in those organizations to click on these links. For instance, Epsilon, which is a very popular breach, they were a mass marketing corporation. They mass marketed for Capital One, Best Buy. It was in the news not long ago. You may have heard of it. What they did is they went on probably LinkedIn, and in LinkedIn, they were able to find the hierarchy of executives and business leaders and people that work for that company with their email addresses and all kinds of information, where they went to school, everything that's on your LinkedIn profile. And so they sent an email to these people with an attachment, with an Excel attachment that had some financial data in it. So they sent it to their financial department, and they basically said, here's some payroll information. So if you're a person that worked at a company and payroll information was sent to you, you may be curious enough to see how much the people in your organization are making. And of the 12 people it was sent to, several of them clicked on it and effectively installed bots or malware onto their machines, and this allowed the people the cyber criminals to get access anonymously, nobody knows who did it, to get access to their database and steal their information. So it's a very simple procedure and process. It's almost too easy. So what do we do about it? So we're looking at this graph here. It's the coverage model. Almost all companies focus, again, on keeping people out. And they think of this as a technology issue, not a business issue. So it gets delegated down to the technology group. So the typical place that you see a lot of focus on security is under the P column, protection, and technical. So your firewall, your virus protection software, your passwords, you might have spam prevention, you might have malware prevention, you may have encryption on some of your data, all kinds of ways to protect the information. The reality is that there's 8 other critical areas to be concerned with. One is administrative. Under detection, you have education, end user education. So having your people in your organization educated on how security breaches occur and knowing when to come forth and say, I think that I may have done something incorrectly, and knowing that it's okay to say that, would probably go a lot longer, a lot further in securing your data than a firewall or virus protection ever will. I'm not suggesting that we get rid of our firewalls and our virus protection. I'm just simply stating that it's not the end-all answer. If that was the answer to all security issues, or even intrusion detection, which is a detection mechanism, then companies wouldn't be getting breached. A lot of people think you need intrusion detection, but in the case of, I mentioned the University of Miami, the information was taken outside of the company. It was on a USB drive in his car and it was stolen. This happened with the War Veterans Affairs, or the Virginia Veterans Affairs. The guy took it on a laptop without authorization. He took all the data on his laptop, and he was at like a Panera or a Starbucks, and he was connected to their internet, their open Wi-Fi. He got up to use the restroom, and somebody stole his laptop. So there's no firewalls or intrusion detection systems that can prevent that. It's end-user education that would have helped prevent that. And having incident response or business continuity plans, or even the physical alarm mechanisms that you would want. Oftentimes, a lot of systems are compromised because of the cleanup crew. So the janitors will come in, and they may have a preteen or a young teenage child, son or daughter, who they can't trust at home alone, so they bring him along, and he's bored, so he sits at one of the computers on your network that isn't password protected, and his parents are cleaning the facility, and he starts to go online and do things that he shouldn't be doing with that computer, and ultimately infects the system and the network. We've seen that particular story happen several times, time and time again. So having a policy to maybe auto-lock your systems or things like that, it's a really good idea. So how security works overview, we went over the house, the principle of why detection is the key. We looked at the cloud, how the firewall is really no longer the way that people are getting in. It's not what's getting in. The mindset should be what's going out. What are ways for people to get data out of here? Because we know they can get in. They've already demonstrated that. And then the principle of the coverage model, the holistic security, thinking about it as a business issue and not as a technology issue. So where to look? John Celio is an author of a book called Think Like a Spy. It's basically how to prevent identity theft. And at the end of his book, he has a checkbox of actual action items, things you can do, whether it's opting out of mailings or not carrying your social security number in your wallet or other credentials in your wallet that could cause you to have your identity exposed or compromised or used fraudulently. But he just encourages us to think like a spy, interrogate. When somebody calls and says, I need this information sent to me, I'm your financial person, there's a famous author of a book called How to Con Somebody, basically. It's a guy named Kevin Smythe. He says how easy it is to trick somebody into sending their information to them, just tricking them by saying he's an important person that they need this information, and then this person will just send all the financial records to this person, trusting that they are who they say they are. So thinking like a spy and having this as a culture, it will also help you minimize the possibility of somebody stealing your information through social engineering attacks like tricking people. So new approach to asset protection. Again, evaluate your risk. So how do we measure risk? It's the impact versus the likelihood. So we already know the impact is going to be high. If your data is compromised or lost, it's going to impact your business. It's going to cause a problem. So, and that is uncontrollable. The controllable side is the likelihood. So let's use an airline as an example. It's much more highly likely that a regional airline would have a crash versus a national airline. We already know the result of a plane crash will have loss of life, and that's going to be very impactful. And we cannot change the impact of that. There's a chance that there are survivors, but in most cases, when a plane goes down, there's loss of life. So what is a national airline that's doing differently? They certainly have more flights, and they fly more frequently than a regional airline, but their pilots may have more frequent training. There might be more systems in place to make sure that there are more frequent checkups on the planes. There's certainly more money for that kind of thing. More stringent measures are put in place. So if you do those things to protect your data, the same result should occur. If you're doing nothing about it and you're just hoping that your technology will take care of it, the likelihood is much higher than if you have lots of training going on and lots of ongoing assessments and monitoring and checkups, things like that going on in your system. And so how do we manage our risk? By changing the technology mindset to an asset mindset. So when you're looking at technology, a lot of times we'll focus on how fast it is, how fast it goes, how the speed, the gigahertz, the megahertz, the megabytes, the capacities. And what we need to be looking at is the information that's going to be stored on it. Is that going to be protected? Is that going to be secure? The actual cost of the upfront cost of a product is very minor compared to the investment necessary to make sure that the information that's stored on those systems is kept up to date properly so that it's not left vulnerable. So it's changing that thought process. Measure it. So let's take a look at the likelihood, see where the vulnerabilities are, put a process or a program in place to mitigate these risks, and then monitor this activity and have it done repeatedly. So don't just do an assessment and fix those problems and then never looking at it again. Things will certainly change. The landscape of threats could change. Certainly people are going to be becoming less aware of issues that could be happening. So it's an ongoing discipline in the organization. You need to change the mindset. Start thinking about the data and not the technology. And monitor it. Detect and respond. That's the key. Quick response and the ability to detect. So that concludes the security part, or that section. I wanted to touch on another very popular thing that's happening now. It's called cloud computing, and the risks involved that most don't know about who haven't gone in this direction and may be considering it. Cloud computing is not a new thing. It's been around for probably over a decade. It's just got a new name. It used to be called application service provider. So ASPs were around, in the late 90s, and the problems back then are still mostly the same problems that we have today. The same risks, although there are new risks and new threats, a lot of the same ones still exist. So if you look at cloud computing, this is the way it works. So in this example, we have a CPA firm, and then on the other side of the internet, we have the cloud provider. So all of the data today is stored at the CPA firm, and they're going to move all this information into a cloud provider, into their system, and then have them host it and access it over the internet. So now they don't have servers in their network, and they don't have to worry about backing up and keeping things up to date. So that's the theory, at least. So email, financial records, client information, intellectual property, all kinds of data is stored on most companies, but certainly with CPA firms. So now this data is being moved over to these cloud providers and stored on their systems. So the initial problem that will happen in most cases is the discovery of a bottleneck or some sort of bandwidth issue. If you think about the speed of your local network, typically it's in the 100 to 1,000 meg or gig speed. Once it's on the internet, you're bound to the speed of your internet connection. So if your connection is 1.5 meg, which is a T1, or if you have a 4 or 5 meg Comcast speeds, or even FiOS of 20 to 50 megs, it's still a fraction or a small portion of what you had internally. So like a lot of cases, if you have a T1, because people will buy them because of the stability, you're at 100 of the speed, or just over. So you'll initially see a lag, a very slow processing of information, especially if you're having to transfer data from your system to your server, and it's large quantities of data. The other problem is who has access to it? Who is on the other end of this, and what are their employees, and who are they, and are they trustworthy? The other issue is that a lot of these cloud providers are startups. They're just starting their business. And so this is what happens. So I go out, and I'm going to start a cloud or a hosting business. I'm going to host data. So I have to make a huge initial investment. I have to buy lots of servers and lots of equipment, and backup systems and everything to house the capacity of several clients and host their systems. I also have the recurring cost of the bandwidth fees and the power fees and the redundancy and things like that. So there's a lot of upfront, and there's a big ongoing monthly fee that you have to pay. And so you're starting up with some venture capital money, or maybe just friends and family, and that money will run out generally pretty quickly, 6 to 8, maybe 10 months, depending on how much you started out with and how big you started. And so these businesses are going to fail. They're going to go out of business. And this is the case with any new business, not just cloud providers. Restaurants have a very short lifespan. Any new business has about a 97, 98% chance of failing in the first year. So when that occurs and your data is with this cloud provider, you need to be thinking about, how am I going to get this data back, and will I be able to get this data back? If the provider is locked out of his business or locked out of his facility and the power is cut off because he didn't make rent 3 months in a row, you're going to be off. And if he can't get access to it, you probably won't either. So that's a big unknown threat to be careful with. There's some other threats. You've had providers losing data. Amazon lost a lot of information a few 6 or 8 months ago. Netflix was affected by that. And a couple other big online companies. Magnolia.net, less known, they had a crash. They lost lots of data. They basically told their clients, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about it. Same thing with Amazon. Denial of service attack is when a system is flooded with traffic to cripple its system. There was an outage with Google a couple of years ago. It lasted over 6 hours. So if you're using the Google Docs or posting email with Google, you would have not had access to that information for about half a day or a little more. Certainly Facebook has had outages, and lots of companies have seen denial of service attacks. We've seen it happen with our local companies here before, and so it can happen to small businesses as well. Data interception, as I mentioned already, performance issues are always a major problem with hosted systems. Oversubscribing, so the idea is to make a profit, so you might sell more users on the system than can actually hold and just try to push the limits of it. And then the provider's going out of business. And also, if the data is compromised off of your provider's data systems, you're actually the one that's responsible for that. So if you have a breach as a result of your provider not having enough security or being able to deal with the detection strategy, there's a chance that, well, there is, it'd be your fault. Also, if you want to get out of your agreement and want to bring your data back, there's very little in the way of legal documentation that says that they have to legally give the data back. When you give them the data, you essentially are giving them the information. It becomes their property. And if they give it back to you, there's nothing that states that they can't keep a copy. So they can have a copy of your data and use that information. And there's really no legal binding contracts that are out there that keep that from happening. I'm sure as issues like this arise, there'll be a whole breed of law firms and lawyers that are coming out of it. But as it stands right now, there's very little there. So that concludes the presentation. Hopefully you're ready to take some action, and maybe you got some ideas to implement right away. The key is to protect, detect, and respond, and to focus on your assets. So the special offering for anybody who attended this webinar today, your opportunity to have a complimentary assessment, a risk assessment performed on your organization. We'll come visit your office. We'll bring our security experts with us. They'll take a look at your systems and look for vulnerabilities, and maybe they'll also scan for bots and look for malicious code that might be exposing your data already. It's not uncommon that we don't find some instances of this or discover that your data hasn't been backed up in years or in months, or is not being backed up the way that you could actually restore it. We typically would find things like that. So it's just a good way to get a quick checkup without making an investment. There's a financial investment. If you decide to do anything beyond that point, that's your choice, but up to that point, there's nothing that you have to commit to. So I strongly recommend you take advantage of this opportunity and have us schedule an assessment with you. You can contact me through my email or a phone, the phone number that's listed below. It's just a simple thing, and we'll set up an appointment. Usually takes less than a couple hours, and we can usually find something that would uncover a major threat that you may not be aware of. So with that, thanks again for joining our presentation. I hope you got a lot of it, and I hope you have a great day.